The icy winds cut through the crowded streets of Washington, D.C., their frigid touch forcing pedestrians to pull their coats closer, hands buried deep in pockets to fend off the biting cold. Karoline Leavitt, 27, the White House press secretary, strode forward in a sleek black coat, her boots tapping steadily against the pavement. Her sharp eyes scanned the bustling scene, searching for something undefined. Instead of retreating to the warmth of her government vehicle after an intense press briefing, she chose to walk, compelled by an unexplainable urge to immerse herself in the city's unfiltered energy. But as she turned into a narrow alley, her steps hesitated. Before diving further into the story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest updates. Under the dim light of a street lamp, a man sat huddled against a cold stone wall, an old military coat draped over his shoulders, its once vibrant green now faded to a weary gray. In front of him lay a scrawled cardboard sign, "Veteran needs help." His gaunt hands clutched at his body, desperate for any remaining warmth against the relentless chill. Karoline came to a full stop, her breath turning to white mist in the frosty air. Her deep brown eyes met the man's, unwavering. Lowering herself to the frozen pavement, she shrank the distance between them to mere inches. The wind tugged at her blonde hair, but her focus remained steady, cutting through the darkness. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice clear, more of an invitation than a casual inquiry. The man lifted his head slowly, his hollow eyes reflecting surprise at being addressed. The cold wind continued to howl through the alley, carrying the distant hum of traffic. Yet between them, an unusual stillness formed. His breath came out in heavy, wispy puffs. "Jack. Jack Miller," he rasped, his voice rough, like gravel, shifting underfoot. Each syllable bore the weight of long, weary years. "Former Marine Bravo Company." Karoline gave a small nod, her gaze never leaving his face as if reading every line carved by time and hardship. She pulled her coat tighter around herself but remained kneeling, her knees pressed against the icy ground. "Bravo Company," she repeated thoughtfully. Jack's eyes flickered with a brief spark of recognition before dimming again. "I've heard of that unit. Afghanistan, right?" Karoline asked, tilting her head slightly. Jack raised an eyebrow, a fleeting glimmer passing through his clouded gaze like a fading ember. "Yeah," he murmured, his hand instinctively brushing against the worn fabric of his coat where a few old patches still clung. "We were in Kandahar. The early days were long." His voice dropped, as if the weight of past memories was pulling him, back to a place he wished to forget. Karoline's blonde hair swayed in the wind as she studied him. "What happened, Jack?" she asked, her tone free of pressure, just a genuine desire to listen. There was something about the way she looked at him, not with pity, but with sincere curiosity, that made it impossible for him to look away. Jack cleared, his throat, his frail fingers gripping the edge of his coat. "War," he said bitterly. "I went through a few deployments, did things no one wants to remember, but we did it for the country." He paused, his eyes drifting down to the cardboard sign in front of him, as if it held the weight of his final confession. "Then I came home. No job, no health. The system promised help, but it left me behind." His voice faltered as he hesitated. "Family." He stopped abruptly, his shoulders trembling, not from the cold, but from something deeper. Karoline remained silent for a moment, her breath visible in the freezing air. Resting a hand on her knee, her fingers tapped lightly as though she was piecing together her thoughts. "My grandfather was a veteran too," she finally said, her voice softer now, as if unveiling a rare, personal truth. "He never spoke about the war, but I saw it in his eyes, the way he'd sit alone for hours staring out the window saying nothing." "I always wondered what he went through," Karoline admitted. Jack lifted his gaze, meeting hers for the first time without hesitation. "Your granddad was lucky," he whispered. "He had family to sit with." She offered a small, genuine smile, one that carried warmth in the cold air. Do you have family, Jack? She asked, her voice gentle but laced with deep curiosity. Jack took a long breath, his trembling fingers brushing against the pocket where an old, crumpled photo lay hidden. I did, he said, his voice unsteady. My wife. She couldn't handle me after I came back. I wasn't the same. My daughter, she's grown now, but I don't dare look for her. I don't want her to see me like this. He gestured toward his torn coat and the shoes riddled with holes, as if they were undeniable proof of his downfall. Karoline frowned, a spark of determination igniting in her eyes. But you're still Jack Miller from Bravo Company, she said, firmly. What did your unit do in Kandahar? I want to hear it. A dry, almost forgotten smile tugged at Jack's lips, a ghost of a laugh escaping for the first time in years. We were the ghost team, he said, his voice rasping but gaining a faint energy. No one saw us come. No one saw us go. We held Kandahar when everything fell apart. But back home, his voice trailed off, the fleeting pride quickly swallowed by the weight of reality. No one remembered. Karoline nodded slowly, pulling her phone from her coat pocket, her fingers moving swiftly across the screen as if noting something. Ghost team, she murmured, almost as if engraving the words into her memory. Then, lifting her eyes, she met his once more. You don't belong here, Jack. Not after what you did. Jack stared at her, his gaze wavering between doubt and a fragile glimmer of hope. Who are you to care about a guy like me? He asked, his voice rough but tinged with a hesitant challenge. I'm Karoline, she answered simply, offering no titles or credentials. And I care because I can't stand seeing someone like you forgotten. She rose, brushing the dirt off her knees, then extended a steady hand toward him. Come with me, Jack. He hesitated, looking down at her outstretched hand, small with red-painted nails but somehow strong. The cold wind surged through the alley, carrying the heavy thud of Jack's heartbeat in his chest. He was used to being unseen, a ghost, drifting through the streets. But now, for the first time in years, someone truly noticed him. Jack took a deep breath, his shaky hand reaching for Karoline's. His calloused palm gripped hers, slow yet firm. Okay, he whispered, his voice nearly swallowed by the wind. He pushed himself up, his weak legs trembling under his weight, but the steady brightness in her eyes kept him standing. Karoline smiled, a warmth in her expression that carried an unshakable resolve. Let's go, she said, her voice soft yet unwavering. Without hesitation, she led him out of the alley, her steps quick and certain as if she had already made up her mind the moment he took her hand. The wind still howled between the towering buildings of Washington, D.C., but she didn't let it slow her down. Jack shuffled beside her, his torn shoes scraping against the pavement. His breath was labored, but something in his gaze flickered, something long buried. She glanced at him, her brown eyes sharp with unspoken determination. Pulling her phone from her coat pocket, she dialed swiftly. Sarah, she said as the call connected, her tone low but firm. I need a hotel room near DuPont Circle if possible. Text me the address in 5 minutes. She didn't wait for a response, ending the call immediately before turning back to Jack. You okay? She asked, her voice gentle but edged with urgency. Jack nodded slowly, his hunched shoulders trembling as he struggled to keep pace. I'm fine, he whispered, though exhaustion made his voice waver. He glanced at her, doubt still lingering. In his eyes, you don't have to do this, I'm used to being out there. Karoline paused, turning to face him fully, her eyes locked onto his, unwavering. No, Jack, she said, her voice like steel. You don't belong out there, not tonight, not after what you did in Kandahar. A small smile tugged at her lips, softening. The edge in her words. Think of it as me owing Bravo Company a thank you. Jack smirked, a weak but genuine smile breaking through. You're stubborn, he muttered, a hint of surprise in his raspy voice. Call it my strength, she replied with a shrug before picking up the pace again. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, the hotel address just 3 blocks away. She nodded to herself, then reached for Jack's torn sleeve, giving it a small, "Gibby, come on," she said, pulling him along. "Just a few more minutes." When they reached the hotel, the warm golden light from the lobby spilled onto the sidewalk, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. Karoline pushed through the glass doors, leading Jack inside. The receptionist, a young woman in a crisp uniform, looked up from the desk, her eyes widening slightly at Jack, his frayed coat, matted hair, and worn-out shoes. Before she could say anything, Karoline stepped forward, her voice smooth and direct, as if addressing a press briefing. "Room booked under Sarah Grayson. Check it for me." The receptionist nodded, fingers tapping the keyboard before handing over a key card. "Room 312, ma'am. Anything else I can assist with?" "No, thanks," Karoline replied, taking the card and turning to Jack. "Let's go up." She led him toward the elevator, ignoring the curious glances from a few lobby guests. Jack followed, his legs unsteady on the polished marble floor as if he didn't belong. When the elevator doors closed, he glanced at her, his voice low, tinged with suspicion. "Why are you doing this? Planning to take my picture and post it online?" Karoline laughed, a short, clear sound. "If I wanted that, I would have filmed you, back in the alley." She shook her head. "But you're not entirely wrong, I am recording." She raised her phone, pointing the lens at him for a few seconds before lowering it. "No face, don't worry, just capturing the story. The ghost team story." Jack frowned, but before he could respond, the elevator dinged, and the doors slid open to the third floor. Karoline stepped out, leading him down the red-carpeted hallway to room 312. She swiped the key card, pushed open the door, and soft ceiling lights illuminated the space. A pristine white bed, glossy wooden dresser, and a window overlooking the street. Jack hesitated at the threshold, his hands gripping the edges of his coat. "Come in," Karoline said, her voice both firm and gentle. Slowly, he stepped inside, his shoes leaving faint dust trails on the carpet. Sitting at the edge of the bed, he ran a hand over the smooth sheets as if doubting their reality. "How long's it been since I slept in a bed?" he muttered, his voice trailing off like a thought spoken aloud. Karoline leaned against the doorframe, watching as he settled in. "This room's yours tonight," she said. "Shower, rest, eat, I'll be back." She pulled out her phone again, fingers moving quickly as if taking notes. Jack looked up, his gaze sharper now. "You mentioned the ghost team," he said, his voice rough, but steady. "What do you know about us?" She stopped typing, meeting his eyes. "Not much," she admitted. "But I know Bravo Company did the impossible in Kandahar. My grandfather used to talk about teams like that. Ghosts, holding the line when everything fell apart." She paused. "I want to hear it from you." Jack fell silent, his expression unreadable. His hand brushed over the old patch on his coat. "We were the vanguard," he began, his voice slow, measured. "Kandahar, the early days. We moved in the dark. Hit fast, pulled out clean. They called us the ghost team because no one saw us coming." He paused, his eyes dropping to the floor. "But when we got home," his voice grew quieter, "we became ghosts for real. No one saw us anymore." Karoline nodded, her eyes lighting up as if she had just found a crucial puzzle piece. "That story shouldn't be buried, Jack," she said, her voice low but powerful. "Not here, not in that alley." She stepped away from the doorframe, gripping her phone tightly. "Rest. I'll be back tomorrow morning." Jack's gaze snapped up, a flicker of panic, crossing his face. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice unsteady, as if afraid she'd vanish like so many others had before. "The White House," she replied, offering a small, knowing smile. "I've got work to do. For you. For the ghost team." She turned, stepping into the hallway, the door closing behind her. In her coat pocket, her phone buzzed. An idea had sparked in her mind, and she knew she couldn't stop now. Jack sat there alone in the quiet room, his hands still clutching the bed's edge. His gaze lingered on the closed door, and for the first time in years, he felt like he wasn't invisible. Karoline stepped out of the hotel, the cold Washington, D.C., night wind cutting across her face. Her boots clicked quickly against the pavement, streetlights casting her shadow long and fierce. Her phone buzzed again, texts from her assistant Sarah confirming the hotel room was paid for. But her mind was already miles ahead. Jack's story, the ghost team, Bravo Company, the forgotten shadows. The thoughts echoed in her head like a fire just ignited. She knew she had to do something bigger, not just for Jack, but for everyone like him. By the time she reached the White House, the clock was near midnight. The building glowed against the dark sky, but inside it was mostly still, only a few night staff moving quietly through the halls. Karoline strode down the long hallway, her badge swiping through the scanner. A small beep sounded, like the pulse of an idea taking shape. She pushed open the door to her small office, a tidy space with a wooden desk, a laptop, and a few family photos pinned to the walls. Flicking on the light, she sat down, opened her laptop, and without hesitation her fingers flew over the keyboard, typing fast, as if afraid the idea would slip away. She slowed down. First, she searched for Bravo Company. Old articles, military reports, scattered fragments of a unit that held Kandahar in its darkest days. "Ghost Team," she murmured, her eyes gleaming as she spotted the nickname buried in a forgotten document. But after that, nothing. No awards. No recognition. Just silence. Her frown deepened, her hand gripping the desk's edge. "They deserve more than this," she told herself, her voice dropping like a vow. She switched to her phone, opened the XA, and started typing. "Today I met a veteran. He was part of the ghost team, keeping our country safe in the shadows, but now he's invisible in his own homeland, another unseen hero." She posted it without hesitation. Within minutes, the post had dozens of likes, then a few comments. "Thank you for telling this story. How's he doing now?" Karoline smiled, but she knew this was just the start. She needed bigger support. She stood walking through the dim hallway toward the president's office. Trump was still there, seated behind his desk, a stack of papers in front of him. The desk lamp cast deep shadows across his face. She knocked. Lightly, he waved her in without looking up. "Karoline," he said, his voice low. "It's late. Something important?" "Yes, sir." She stood tall, her voice steady. "I met a veteran today, Jack Miller, Bravo Company. He was part of the ghost team in Kandahar, but now he's on the streets." Trump looked up, his eyes narrowed, as if weighing her words. "I want to hold an event, honor him and his unit, not just a night in a hotel, but a bigger message." "Ghost team," he repeated, tapping the desk lightly. "I remember that name. They did the impossible." He paused, then a small smile. "You've got fire in you, Karoline. Run with it. I'll back you." She nodded, her heart pounding. "Thank you. Sir, I'll start now." She turned and left without waiting. The idea in her head was no longer just an idea. It was a plan. Back in her office, she grabbed her phone and called Sarah. "Find me a list of Bravo Company veterans," she ordered, her voice urgent. "I need to contact them as soon as possible." Over the next 2 hours, Sarah sent her a short list, 6 surviving members of Bravo Company, scattered across the country. Karoline started calling. She didn't care about the hour. The first was Tom Hayes, a man in Ohio who had lost a leg in Kandahar. "Jack Miller?" His voice trembled through the speaker. "I thought he was dead." "He's alive," Karoline said, her voice warm. "And I want you at the White House. We're going to tell Bravo Company's story, the real story." Silence. Then a whisper. "All right, I'll come." The next call, Maria Lopez, a combat medic from the unit now in Texas. "Jack was the soul of the team," she said, her voice choking. "When we lost Kandahar, he pulled us through hell. If he needed her, she would be there." Karoline jotted down every detail, her hands shaking with emotion. Each call was another piece of the story. Scars, losses, and buried pride. By 3 a.m., she had reached 4 of them. The other 2 didn't answer, but she didn't give up. She sent emails, left voicemails, determined to find them. Then she sat back, opened a new document on her laptop, and started writing a speech. "They're not just veterans," she typed, her fingers racing. "They're the ghosts who kept us safe, and it's time we see them." She paused, staring at the screen. Then she added another line. "Jack Miller is the start, but not the end." She leaned back in her chair, her eyes stinging from lack of sleep, but adrenaline still pumped through her veins. Her phone buzzed. The post she had made earlier now had thousands of likes, hundreds of shares. One comment read, "This is what America needs to hear." Another wrote, "Tell us more." Karoline smiled, her fingers scrolling through the screen. She replied quickly, "More's coming, stay tuned." Unseen heroes. She stood stepping onto her office's small balcony, gazing at the city cloaked in darkness. The cold wind blew, but she didn't feel it. The fire inside her burned brighter than ever. She thought of Jack sitting in that hotel room and wondered how he'd react to what she was doing. "You're not invisible anymore," she whispered to herself, gripping the railing tight. Before leaving, she returned to her desk, grabbed a pen and paper and scribbled a short note. "Jack, tomorrow, 8 a.m. I'll be there. Be ready to come. With me, Karoline." She folded it, tucked it into her coat pocket, and turned off the light. As she stepped into the hallway, her eyes blazed, as if she could already see the future. A White House ceremony, Jack among his old teammates, and a message echoing beyond any press briefing she'd ever held. The next morning, Karoline stood outside room 312 at the hotel, tapping lightly on the wooden door. She had slept less than 3 hours, but her bright brown eyes still glowed with unstoppable energy. Jack opened the door. His hair was neater, though still messy, and his hole-ridden shoes had been replaced by an old pair of sneakers. She wasn't sure where he had gotten them. His military coat was still draped over his shoulders, like a final layer of armor. "You came," he said, his voice rough but tinged with surprise. "I said I would," Karoline replied, handing him the note she had written last night. "Let's go, Jack. Today is a big day." He frowned but didn't ask more. He just nodded and followed her. As they left the hotel, she led him to a waiting black car. The driver nodded through the rearview mirror. Jack sat silently, hands gripping the seat's edge, his eyes scanning the window as if he couldn't believe he was leaving that dark alley behind. They reached the White House just as the sun rose, pale golden light filtering through the trees. Karoline led Jack through the main gate, her badge swiping through the scanner, security nodding respectfully. Inside, the air buzzed. Staff scurried about, preparing for the event she had planned overnight. Jack slowed, his shoulders tensing, as he took in the vast hallway. White walls, ornate chandeliers. "Where is this?" he asked, his voice low with a hint of unease. "The White House," Karoline answered, turning to smile at him. "Today is about you, Jack, and Bravo Company." Before Jack could react, Karoline ushered him into a small room where a simple gray suit awaited him. "Put this on," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "I'll wait outside." Jack emerged minutes later, the suit fitting his gaunt frame. But he still kept the old military coat draped over his shoulders, unwilling to let go of the past. Karoline nodded approvingly, then led him to the grand briefing room where the ceremony would unfold. Chairs were neatly aligned, chandeliers cast warm light on the polished stone floor, and a podium stood at the center. On the wall, a large screen displayed bold letters, "Honoring Bravo Company, the Unseen Heroes." Jack froze, his eyes sweeping across the room before locking onto 4 figures near the podium, his old Bravo Company teammates. Tom Hayes, his prosthetic leg peeking from his pant cuff, gave a stiff smile. Maria Lopez, her hair tied back, her eyes red with emotion, stared at Jack as if seeing a ghost. The other two, Carlos Rivera and Dan Walsh, stood straight, their hands clasped behind their backs, a habit drilled into them from years of service. "Jack," Maria whispered, stepping forward. Before he could react, she wrapped her arms around him, holding him tight. "I thought you were gone," she choked out. Jack trembled, his arms slowly returning the embrace. His voice broke. "I thought so, too." Tom approached, clapping a firm hand on Jack's shoulder. The four of them stood there, saying nothing more, just sharing looks heavy with meaning, scars that words couldn't capture. From the corner, Karoline watched, gripping the speech she had written the night before. As the clock struck 10, she stepped to the podium, lights illuminating her blonde hair. The room filled, White House staff, a few reporters, and President Trump seated in the front row with a calm, unreadable expression. She cleared her throat, her youthful yet commanding voice ringing through the microphone. "Today, we are here not just to honor one man but a forgotten story. Bravo Company, the ghost team, kept us safe in the shadows. But when they came home, we didn't see them. It's time to change that." She paused, looking straight at Jack. He stood with his teammates, his hands trembling as they clutched his coat. "Jack Miller is the start," she continued. "He is not just a veteran on the streets. He's a ghost who fought for us. And it's time we see him, see all of them." She gestured toward the four veterans, inviting them onto the stage. Chairs shifted as they stepped forward. Tom spoke first, his voice rough. "We lost Kandahar once, but Jack pulled us through. I lost my leg, but not my life. Thanks to him." Maria followed, her eyes teary. "I was the medic, but Jack kept our spirits alive. He never left anyone behind." Carlos and Dan nodded, adding their own small details. Sleepless nights, battles. In the dark, the room fell silent, only the sound of steady breathing filling the air. Karoline stepped forward, resting a hand on Jack's shoulder. "This isn't just about the past," she said, her voice lowering. "It's about wounds no one sees and courage no one acknowledges. Today, that changes." She turned to Trump, nodding slightly. He rose, stepping onto the stage with a small velvet box in hand. With a solemn expression, he opened it, revealing a gleaming medal, small but weighty with meaning. Trump placed the medal around Jack's neck, his deep voice resonating through the room. "Jack Miller, for your service, courage, and sacrifice, we honor you. You're a hero, not just to me, but to everyone here." Applause erupted, echoing off the walls, some in the audience rising to their feet, eyes glistening with emotion. Jack stood there, breathing unevenly, his fingers trembling as they touched the medal, almost as if he doubted it was real. Karoline stepped forward, taking his hand. Her voice, though low, carried clearly through the mic. "This isn't the end, Jack. This is the start for you, for Bravo Company, and for those like you." She turned to the crowd, her eyes blazing with conviction. "Remember the hashtag #TWR, unseen heroes. We won't let them be invisible anymore." Another wave of applause roared through the room, louder this time, lingering like it would never stop. Jack turned to Karoline, his eyes misty with emotion. "Why did you do this?" he whispered, his voice nearly lost in the noise. Karoline smiled, squeezing his hand. "Because you deserve it, Jack. And because I believe one person can change everything." The ceremony ended, and Karoline stepped out of the grand briefing room, her black boots clicking against the stone floor. Her phone was still warm from recording a short video. Behind her, Jack lingered inside, surrounded by his Bravo Company teammates, their eyes bright as they clapped each other on the shoulders. Rare smiles broke across their weathered faces. The sound of applause still echoed in her ears. But she didn't stop to savor it. She opened the X app right there in the hallway, her fingers flying across the screen as she posted the video with a caption. "They fought in the dark to keep us safe. It's time we see them. Unseen heroes." She hit send and kept walking, unaware that within hours the post would shake social media. The video spread like wildfire. Thousands of likes, shares, and comments flooded in. "Karoline Leavitt is who we need. She actually cares," one person wrote. "Bravo Company's story brought me to tears," another added. But not everyone praised her. "She's just grandstanding for Trump," an anonymous account typed. "A cheap White House PR stunt to polish their image." Another comment snapped. The hashtag, unseen heroes climbed to the top of trending topics, but with it came a fierce backlash, splitting the online community into opposing camps. The next day, Karoline stood behind the White House press briefing podium, camera flashes firing relentlessly. A female reporter, her hair tied high, thrust a mic forward, her tone sharp. Miss Leavitt, was yesterday's ceremony just a way for this administration to dodge real issues like unemployment or health care by tossing a medal to a homeless veteran? Karoline tilted her head, her bright brown eyes flashing with a hint of defiance. She smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was sharp, unwavering. If you think a medal is all Jack Miller got, then you haven't heard the full story, she replied, her voice low but steely. Yesterday wasn't a performance. It was the start of recognizing people like him, people the system left behind. I'm not here to polish anyone's image. I'm here to make sure people like Jack aren't invisible anymore. Karoline paused, her gaze sweeping over the room full of reporters. And if you want to talk about healthcare or jobs, wait and see what we do next. The room erupted into a flurry of new questions, cameras flashing, but Karoline met each inquiry head-on. No notes needed. Her confident, sharp responses blended with Gen Z agility, a stark contrast to the usual scripted briefings. As she stepped off the podium, she checked X. Her video had now passed 20,000 shares, and unseen heroes still dominated the trends. Some called her a game changer. Others sneered, labeling her Trump's puppet. Karoline shrugged, slipped her phone into her coat pocket, and walked toward her office. The controversy didn't faze her. It only fueled her resolve. Meanwhile, in a quiet hotel room, morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow on the metal resting on the table. Jack sat on the edge of the bed, still in yesterday's gray suit, his fingers absently brushing the old military coat draped over his shoulders. A knock sounded. Tom Hayes, Bravo Company teammate, prosthetic, leg tapping softly against the floor, stepped inside, holding a piece of paper. "How you holding up after yesterday?" Tom asked, settling into the chair across from him. Jack shrugged, his eyes hollow. "I don't know, Tom," he admitted, his voice raspy. "All those lights, the applause, it's real. But I'm not sure I deserve." "Do?" His fingers gripped the chair's edge as he looked toward the window. "I've been in the dark too long." Tom slid the paper across the table. "An invitation," he said. "National Veterans Gala. They want you to speak. For Bravo Company." Jack stared at the words, his hands trembling slightly as he read. "Speak," he muttered, his voice faltering. "I can't do that, Tom. I don't know how to talk to a crowd." The White House ceremony flashed in his mind. The lights, the cameras, the pounding in his chest, the fear that it had all been a dream that would vanish. Tom leaned forward, his gaze tough but steady. "You were ghost team, Jack. You led us through nights no one thought we'd survive. If you could do that, you can do this." He clapped Jack's shoulder before standing. "Think about it." Tom left and Jack sat alone, the invitation still in his hands. Slowly, he stood, walking toward the window, looking down at the bustling street below. He thought of Karoline, how she'd knelt in that alley, how she'd turned his story into a light for the nation. Jack reached into his coat pocket, pulled out the medal and carefully placed it around his neck. Its weight tugged at his shoulders, but it also made him stand taller. He turned to the mirror. A gaunt man stared back, his hair still messy, his face still worn, but he was no longer hunched. "If she believes I can do it," Jack whispered, "maybe I have to try." He stood in the dim hotel room, clutching the National Veterans Gala invitation, his eyes locked on the bold print. Guest speaker, Jack Miller, Bravo Company, the White House. Ceremony medal rested against his chest, the cool metal brushing his skin, a reminder that he was no longer the nameless man in a dark alley. Tom's words echoed in his mind. "You led us through nights no one thought we'd survive. You can do this." Jack took a deep breath, folded the paper, and tucked it into the worn pocket of his old military coat. "Let's see." Days later, Jack stepped into the gala hall. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting golden light across the vast room. Conversations hummed around him, blending with the clink of glasses and the rustle of pressed uniforms. He wore a new black suit, a gift from Karoline, with a handwritten note tucked inside. "You're the voice they need, Jack." His new shoes clicked against the polished wood floor, but his hands shook as he adjusted his tie. A thin sheen of sweat trickled down his neck. Jack scanned the crowd. Veterans in crisp uniforms, their families gathered beside them. Near the stage, Tom Hayes gave a small nod, silent reassurance. But Jack's pulse pounded. It felt like stepping into a new battlefield. In the front row, Karoline sat poised, her glossy black boots tapping lightly. The deep red of her dress added to her youthful yet commanding presence. Her phone was ready to record. Her bright brown eyes tracked Jack, steady, unwavering. Beside her, President Trump sat upright, fingers tapping the armrest, his gaze calm and unreadable. Jack took the stage. The lights were blinding. He blinked rapidly, his breath ragged, like when he'd sprinted through Kandahar's life or death. Lines. The crowd hushed, hundreds of eyes fixed on him. His throat went dry. Jack pulled the note from his pocket, but his trembling hands blurred the words. He looked down, found Karoline's gaze. Bright, steady, a beacon in the storm. She smiled faintly, nodded. He took a deep breath. His raspy voice broke the silence. "I'm not good at talking," he admitted, his voice shaky. "I used to think I had nothing left to say." He swallowed, his voice growing firmer. "I came back from war thinking it was over. But I was wrong. The real fight started when I got home, fighting to find myself, to not be forgotten." A heavy pause. His hands tightened on the podium, his eyes scanned the room. "I was lost, living like a ghost on the streets, until someone stopped and saw me." His gaze shifted to Karoline. She dipped her head, a silent thank you. Jack exhaled. Karoline Leavitt gave me the chance to stand here." His voice caught, but he pressed on. "But I'm not here just for me." He straightened, the metal against his chest. "I'm here for people like me, those who fought, those who sacrificed, and those who are now left behind. We don't need pity. We need to be seen." The room stilled. Only the quiet, steady breathing of the audience filled the space. A few wiped away tears. Others nodded, as if Jack's words had unearthed wounds they had long buried. He took another breath, his voice stronger now. "I was ghost team in Kandahar. We didn't leave anyone behind. And now I want to make sure no veteran gets left behind. Not here, not in this country." The silence shattered. Applause erupted, rolling through the hall, stretching on like it would never stop. Jack stood taller, shoulders no longer trembling. His eyes burned with something new. Purpose. Across the room, some stood and saluted. Jack nodded, saying nothing more. But the faint smile on his lips said everything. Karoline stood, clapping with the rest. Then she signaled to Trump. The president took the stage, mic in hand, his deep voice carrying over the crowd. "Jack Miller just said what we needed to hear." He glanced at Jack. "He's proof that people like him don't just deserve honor. They deserve support." The crowd hushed. Trump's gaze swept the room. "That's why I'm announcing the Unseen Heroes Fund, led by Jack. This fund will bring housing, jobs, and health care to veterans. A promise that no one gets left behind." The applause roared again, louder this time. Jack turned, first to Trump, then to Karoline. His eyes glistened with something deeper than gratitude. Trump clapped his shoulder and leaned in. "You did good, Jack." As he stepped off the stage, Karoline approached. She took his hand, her voice quiet but clear. "I told you you could do it." Jack smiled, truly smiled for the first time. "You made me believe it." He gave her hand a squeeze. As the gala ended, Jack stepped down, surrounded by his Bravo company teammates. They clapped his back, hugged him, as if they'd reclaimed a piece of themselves. Karoline stood back, watching silently. Her phone buzzed with thousands of notifications. She didn't check. After the National Veterans Gala, Jack Miller left the stage to thunderous applause. His shoulders no longer trembled. His eyes, once hollow, now burned with fire. His speech had been awkward, punctuated by raw, emotional pauses, but it had pierced the hearts of hundreds in the room. In the front row, Karoline rose, clapping, a radiant smile on her lips as Jack descended, clutching his crumpled note like a trophy. Beside her, Trump nodded in approval, then stood. He announced the Unseen Heroes Fund, with Jack at its helm, a commitment to housing, health care, and jobs for veterans. That moment marked the start of something bigger than Jack or Karoline had ever imagined. Months passed. The Unseen Heroes Fund was no longer just a name on paper. With Jack leading the charge, it grew, fast. From a small initiative, it became a nationwide movement. Jack traveled everywhere, from veteran centers in Ohio to tiny Texas towns, meeting the people he once was, forgotten, sidelined, invisible. And he listened. His calloused hands shook theirs, his eyes, once empty, now shone with empathy and resolve each time. He recounted his journey, from a shadowed alley in D.C. to standing before a captivated audience at the gala. The room fell silent, then erupted in applause, as misty eyes reflected renewed hope. Karoline attended the fund's events occasionally, but often remained in the background, her polished black boots tapping softly as she documented the moments on her phone. She never sought recognition. This was Jack's moment. She simply wanted to witness the legacy she had helped ignite. One afternoon in Virginia, she watched Jack cut the ribbon on a newly built housing complex for veterans. Amidst the celebration, an elderly man with snow-white hair stepped forward, embracing Jack with tears streaking his face. "I finally have a home," he said, his voice breaking. Jack gave a silent nod, but as his eyes locked with Karoline's across the crowd, she knew he was thinking of her as well. The initiative extended beyond housing. It introduced job training programs and mental health support, resources Jack himself had lacked upon returning from Kandahar. A young veteran in California, after completing a technical course, secured a job as a mechanic. He later sent Jack a handwritten letter. "I thought I had no future. Thank you for giving me a chance." In Florida, a war widow joined a support group funded by the program and was reunited with her son after years of separation. Each success story became another foundation block in the legacy that Karoline and Jack were building together. Late nights in the White House, Karoline would sometimes open X and see Dunch Unseen Heroes trending, a symbol embraced by thousands. She scrolled through messages. "This fund changed my life," or "Jack Miller is the advocate we needed." She smiled but refrained from responding. This was Jack's time to shine. Standing on her office balcony one night, she gazed at the sleeping city and reflected. It started with one person, but now it's a movement. The night air was cold, but she felt warmth, like the spark she ignited in that alley was still burning. Jack, once uneasy under the spotlight, now spoke with confidence, no longer trembling under the weight of the moment. He stood tall in a sharp black suit, medals glinting on his chest. His voice, once raspy with uncertainty, now carried strength as he lobbied for policies to aid veterans. He met with lawmakers, recounting the struggles of Bravo Company and the thousands of veterans who had been overlooked. He fought for real, tangible change. Each night, as he returned to the modest apartment provided by the fund, he would pause before the mirror. The face staring back was still weathered, but the shadows beneath his eyes had faded, replaced with something unfamiliar: peace. Jack and Karoline rarely crossed paths, but when they did, words were unnecessary. At a small event in Maryland, Jack approached her, shook her hand, and simply said, "Thank you, Karoline." She returned his smile and replied, "You made it happen, Jack." But they both understood the truth. It all began with an outstretched hand in the cold, and now it had brought light to thousands. A year later, the Unseen Heroes Fund had helped over 500 veterans rebuild their lives, and Jack had become a beacon of hope. Their story reflects real issues in American society: the neglect of veterans and the power of individual action to drive change. In the U.S., Thousands of veterans like Jack struggle with homelessness, inadequate health care, and the mental toll of war. The harsh reality? Over 37,000 veterans sleep on the streets each night, according to recent HUD data. Jack, with his worn military jacket and a cardboard sign reading, "Veteran needs help," in a dark alley, represented the countless servicemen and women who sacrificed for their country, only to be forgotten. Karoline, a young Gen Z White House press secretary, embodied the resilience of today's youth, leveraging platforms like X and her position to amplify their voices. She turned chakra unseen heroes into a movement that swept the nation. The lesson here isn't just about kindness, it's about action. Real change happens when people take concrete steps, even in a fast-paced, divided society. Karoline didn't hold extraordinary power, but she had the ability to listen and act, stopping in the cold alley that night to ask Jack's name, arranging a hotel for him, and later creating an opportunity at the White House gala. These small actions set off a ripple effect. Jack's transformation, from a man uncertain in the limelight to the leader of a nationwide initiative, proves that anyone, given the right support, can overcome adversity and rise. A practical takeaway? Listen just as Karoline did when Jack spoke of his past. Use whatever platform you have, whether a conversation, social media, or community engagement, to uplift others. In a society where it's easy to scroll past cries for help, pause, act, believe that one small gesture, like Karoline's outstretched hand, can ignite a movement. If Jack and Karoline's story resonated with you, consider subscribing to join us in sharing the stories of unseen heroes. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video as we continue to explore the impact of kindness